It's the 2014 World Blitz Championship. Magnus Carlsen takes on Grandmaster Laurent Fressient from France. Laurent Fressient opens with e4. Magnus is thinking what to play. And now Magnus goes knight to f6, developing his knight, attacking Laurent's e4 pawn. We have the Alekhine defense on the board. Laurent pushes the pawn, Magnus undevelops his knight. And there we go, we have the smirk. Did you see it? We have the smirk from Magnus, and even his opponent is smiling after Magnus undeveloped his knight. So why did Magnus play a move like knight g8? Let's break down the game and let's go to our analysis board. So why did Carlsen play knight g8? Well, one of the main reasons for playing knight g8 is to avoid opponent's opening preparation and take him into unknown territory. Now, white plays d4. Okay, white is taking control of the center and Carlsen plays d6. So the main idea or the main strategy of the Alekhine opening is to force white to overextend, which is what white did with e4 and e5. And then after white has overextended, to attack that overextension or to punish white for overextending his pawn. That's all that Alekhine strategy with black pieces is about. So after d6, white develops with knight f3, getting one more piece to defend this pawn on e5. Black goes c6. White plays h3, not allowing this bishop to land on g4. So the bishop decides to land on f5. It's on a very nice diagonal here. So white, oops, not like that. So white decides to challenge the bishop with the move bishop to d3. Carlsen takes, white takes, and now Carlsen takes on e5. White takes with the knight on e5, and Magnus goes knight to d7, challenging this central knight. And if white doesn't do anything, black is going to take and trade off queens. And after the queens are traded, the position is going to be equal. So white has to avoid the exchanges and plays bishop f4, protecting the knight with the bishop. Black develops his knight, white develops, and now black takes knight into e5. White takes back with the bishop. Carlsen goes e6, finishing the development of this dark squared bishop. And white long castles. Carlsen continues to develop with bishop e7. White gets his king to b1, away from any checks along this diagonal, and this is always a very good prophylactic move to make. Carlsen also short castles, gets his king to safety, connects the rook. White goes queen to g3. Black's king is under a little bit of pressure, not a lot, but a little bit of pressure. So Carlsen decides to ask what this queen is doing on g3 and tries to go knight to h5, asking the queen what it is doing. Okay, now remember the queen cannot capture here and give a checkmate because the knight is protecting the pawn. So the queen decides to drop back to f3, attacking the knight. The knight has to retreat because otherwise it would get captured. It drops back to f6 and white plays h4. Now if black doesn't do anything here, he could very easily get overrun. Okay, like there would be h5, h6, this pawn would roll all the way and try to expose this king. So Carlsen uses a very typical idea to defend. He goes knight to d7. The plan is to exchange of this knight with this bishop. White goes knight to e4. Now Carlsen can take the bishop, but after taking, white will also take. This rook will hit the queen. So Carlsen instead decides to first play the move queen to a5, getting the queen away from this d file. And after queen to g3, now there is a checkmate threat on g7. Now Carlsen captures this bishop. White takes with the pawn. Black's king is like the white queen is facing the black king. This knight could jump in at f6, whereas black's pieces are almost not participating in the game except the queen. All the other pieces are kind of sleeping on their in their home. So Carlsen has to make sure that he gets counterplay fast. So he plays rook a d8, taking control of this d file with the rook. And now in this position, white plays knight to d6, stopping these rook from exchanging and at the same time attacking this pawn. Now this knight could become a problem if it is left, to be on d6. So Carlsen chops it off with bishop into d6. And this is a crucial moment for white. How does white recapture? With the pawn or with the rook? The better way is to capture with the pawn. The thing is, you want to keep as many pieces as possible for this pawn to be dangerous. But in the game, after bishop into d6, white took with the rook. And from here on, Magnus Carlsen just comes into his own. First he captures the rook, captures, and then plays rook d8. Although here the better move would have been to go queen to d2. The idea of this move is to not only keep a watch on this pawn, but at the same time prevent white's rook from coming in the game. When you can create a threat and at the same time defend your opponent's threat. Okay, these moves, if you can do it in a single move, that's most likely going to be a good move. Queen d2 would have been better, but Carlsen goes rook d8, allows white to go rook d1. You give white one more move, this pawn is going to come to d7, so Carlsen blocks it instantly with rook d7. White plays b3, black plays h6. Both the kings have escape squares for themselves. White goes queen to f4, black plays queen to c5, white plays g3. Now in this position, think, how would you play if you were Magnus Carlsen? Alright, so in this position, if black wants to start to play for a win, he first needs to get rid of this d6 pawn. Okay, it's a very nasty pawn in black's territory. Black has to get rid of it. How will you get rid of it? You have two attackers, that is good, but white has two defenders as well. Okay, which means if you want to win this d6 pawn with black, you have to bring one more attacker in the game. But where will you bring that attacker from? That attacker is going to be this king, which is why Carlsen wants to get this king closer to the pawn. So he first goes f6, and after rook d3 he plays king f7. Now he's coming closer to the pawn. White goes queen d2, and now Carlsen pushes e5. Just in a span of 3 moves, we have the king that is going to come to e6, charging at this pawn. This pawn is soon going to be lost. So you see how there was just one pawn weakness that white left, and Carlsen is suddenly pouncing on it. Carlsen's opponent went rook c3. Now Carlsen could take this d6 pawn, but here he makes another smart decision. Instead of taking the pawn, he goes queen to b4. Carlsen is saying, I have plenty of time to take this d6 pawn. I don't need to take it right away. Rook d3 doesn't change much because captures, and the king moves to e6, and this pawn on d6 will be lost on the next move. So white decides to first play king b2, protect this rook with the king. But this actually turns out to be a big mistake, because Carlsen plays rook into d6, and after queen e2, he executes a fantastic maneuver. A maneuver that literally paralyzes 2 of white's pieces. Can you find it? So in the game, Carlsen plays queen to d4. Beautiful move. First of all, this queen pins the rook, which means the rook cannot move anywhere. And secondly, what that does is that it also forces the king to keep protecting the rook. Okay, because if the king moves back to c1, the rook is going to be lost. If the king moves anywhere, the rook is going to be lost. Okay, now suddenly both these pieces are paralyzed. White's only piece that he can play with is the queen. And white cannot even exchange queens, because if he tries to exchange queens on his own, black is always happy to exchange queens, right? Because black is up a pawn, and when you are ahead in material, you want to exchange pieces. So queen d4, nice move, paralyzing white's position. White played queen h5 check, trying to create some counterplay with the queen. Carlsen goes king f8, and now both players were a little bit in time trouble. Carlsen goes king g8, b4, not allowing b4 from black anymore. King f7, the queen jumps to c8, Magnus plays h5, and after queen f5, Carlsen offers a queen trade with queen to g4. Now the best move for white is to reject the queen trade, and there is only one way to do that, that is to go queen h7. But already both players had very little time at this point. He exchanged queens, and after hg4, white played king c1. Being a pawn down in endgame against Magnus Carlsen, that is a very dangerous combination. Carlsen plays king e6, centralizing his king. White plays a4, Carlsen simply defends with a6, a5, and now king d7. Protecting the pawn first so that the rook can move. Now the rook has moved. After c3, Carlsen breaks with c5, putting pressure on the pawn. King c2, Carlsen pushes the pawn to c4. Rook e4, attacking the pawn, but Carlsen simply plays f5, protecting the pawn and attacking the rook. So the rook has to drop back. Now Carlsen once again brings his king forward. So you see, slowly, Carlsen has pushed his pawns and at the same time he is improving his position. Now white goes king to c1. So Carlsen now goes rook to d3, asking this rook what it is doing. White plays king c2. Carlsen exchanges the rook, which is what you should do when you're winning. You want to exchange pieces and go into an endgame, preferably a king and pawn endgame. F into e3. Carlsen's king comes forward. I'll leave you with a clip of how the game ended. Don't forget to smash the like button and subscribe to my channel.